That's our person who tells you if it's okay or not.
Yes, it's good.
All right, good. Okay. Well, thanks for coming. I'm Pete Erickson. I'm a professor at UNH. I study dairy management. I'm also involved in cooperative extension as one of the dairy specialists. And I'm going to talk about some of our research that we've been doing on supplementing niacin to prepartum cows and its effect on their calves. This is the second in a series of studies on this. And that's one of our dairy facilities. That's one of my favorite shots. And I can sometimes see if I'm at work that day. It looks like my van is there. So that's one of our facilities. This was the location where the calf research was done, and all the cows were down here. We have another dairy at Burley Demerit Farm in Lee, which is our organic dairy research farm. So when I give talks around the country, I always show this slide, and people are pretty impressed. So colostrum, what is colostrum? It's the first mammary secretion after parturition, after giving birth by mammals, okay? It's very important in ruminants, so cattle, sheep, goats, moose, deer, because of the type of placenta the mother has. Unlike us, these animals, immunoglobulins do not pass in utero, so they have to get their immunity, their antibodies, there we are, their antibodies from the colostrum. Otherwise, they don't do so well. Maternal transfer of immunoglobulin, and the big one for cattle, the antibody for cattle is IgG. It's absent in utero. Colostrum also is the first source of water, and it's also the first source of fat. Calves are born very, very thin. In fact, if we don't give them colostrum in the first 18 hours, they will die because they only have 3% body fat. So it's very critical to them. So why is colostrum important? USDA data, which is from NAMS, National Animal Health Monitoring Service, says about 8% of pre-weaned calves die by 2 months, primarily due to diarrhea. A lot of these calves had something called failure of passive transfer, which is defined as blood immunoglobulin G at 24 hours, less than 10 grams per liter. Ideally, we want this at about 15 grams per liter. And some research from a former UNH student for her PhD at Iowa State showed that 60% of colostrum in the US fails to meet minimum standards. So we've got some work to do. And some interesting aspects of this, and this has been studied a lot lately, there's some things going on with colostrum other than just antibodies. Back in '89, Denise and colleagues found that the more IgG that gets absorbed, the more milk the cow will produce 4 years, 5 years later. That means mature equivalent milk at about 5 years of age. So very interesting. There's other work out of Arizona that indicates similar things. So in other words, how we treat this animal at day one of life impacts how they perform 2, 3, 4 years later. Kind of interesting. We have obviously reduced sickness and reduced death and increased average daily gain, increased growth. So some basics. This is from John Fetro at the University of Minnesota. Quality of colostrum is defined as IgG in the colostrum greater than 50 grams per liter. The amount to feed is at least 4 quarts. A lot of farmers feed 6 quarts. We feed it soon. We have to keep it clean. And then, well, we harvest it soon, we have to keep it clean, and then we feed it right away. We use a hydrometer, and that's depicted here, and it's very simple. You can buy these for $45, $50, and we put the colostrum in a graduated cylinder, and we basically measure the specific gravity. So green means go, so this is good. Red means poor, don't feed it. So this is what's typically done. And what's neat about these is there's gradations on this, so you can actually find out how much IgG is in there. Okay, so when is colostrum made? Called colostrogenesis. It starts about 3 to 4 weeks prepartum in the cow. And what we've found out is how we feed her impacts the quality of colostrum that she makes. And we know that by feeding the correct amount of protein, vitamin E, there's some data from China with selenium, adequate fiber in the ration, all impacts this colostrum quality. Today we'll discuss a new use of the vitamin niacin, which we commonly consume every day. It's not needed in cattle because niacin can be made by the rumen microbes, but supplemental niacin has been shown to be beneficial. And my PhD work was on niacin in dairy cows, so we've kind of gone full circle. So metabolic disorders such as ketosis, it's been shown to reduce that. Heat stress, a lot of work in Arizona has shown that it increases blood flow to cool extremities. We've shown some work with increased protein synthesis in the rumen by the bacteria, can increase milk protein. Typically, this is fed at 6 to 12 grams per day to pre- and postpartum cows, and the cost is about a penny a gram. Previous research, Oregon State did a field study and saw some benefits of niacin on colostrum quality. They fed 24 grams per day. My PhD student, this is her work we're discussing today, Kayla. She fed 48 grams per day of niacin for 4 weeks for her master's and saw an improvement in colostrum quality. So that was a very straightforward 0 grams versus 48 grams. Now we're trying to figure out what the optimum dose is. So the current study, we fed 36 Holstein cows, and these were aged cows, not first calf animals, either 0, 16, 32, or 48 grams per day of niacin for 4 weeks prior to anticipated calving date. Measured feed intake daily, body weight. We used a MOOC, which some of you may be familiar with. I'll show you a picture of that in a minute, to determine calving time. And at calving, the calf was removed, weighed, colostrum was harvested from the cow, it was weighed and sampled, and the calf immediately got 4 liters of its dam's colostrum. And then we sampled blood at birth and 24 hours of age and analyzed for IgG. It's very difficult to get a blood sample at birth. My graduate students are very good vampires. They can do that, so I can't, but they can. All right, so what is a MOOC? Well, we got a little press on this. I was going to bring one, but I forgot it. This is a MOOC. Goes on her tail head. And about 2 hours before calving, her tail starts flicking. You can't see this with your eyes, but this MOOC will sense that and calls your cell phone. So it's dairy technology. So my grad students getting calls at 3 a.m. to go out and deliver this calf. Prior to that, all our calf research we had to rely on the barn crew. So, and it works. We had one cow, a big red and white Holstein, who would rub it off, fall on the floor, and she would have nothing to do with it. So the goal is, this works. It's an Irish company. Our goal is that we're there for calving, and then this is the outcome. So this is what we want. Okay. So then we followed the calves. On day 1, calves are fed 4 liters of a 20% fat, 20% protein, all milk replacer. In the dairy world, this is called conventional milk replacer. Free choice calf grain and water. Daily feed intakes were measured. All calves consumed all of the milk replacer. Only 1 calf was sick during the study. So we had about 46 calves we hit because of twins, and we measured weekly body weights. We're determined to calculate gains in feed efficiencies. We also did a lot of other blood work, but we're not going to really report on that today. Statistical methods. I wanted to look for linear and quadratic effects. So a linear effect is, as a niacin dose increased linearly, does the response respond similarly or inversely? And a significant quadratic effect, this is what we're really looking for, results in the ability to make a dosage recommendation. This is the diet, very typical prepartum cow diet. So I'm not going to go through all that, but that's typically what is fed at the Fairchild Dairy. Okay, so what happened? Dry matter intake, how much feed the cows ate? We tended to have a linear decrease as niacin went up. So dry matter intake tended to go down a little bit. I want to call your attention to this treatment here. This is the one that was problematic. Colostrum yield, not different. So this is how many liters of colostrum they produced. Even though this is quite a bit lower, it still was not significantly different. So we saw no effect here. Now, the IgG yield we did. So we saw a quadratic response. If I looked at IgG concentration, we saw a similar response, or actually a linear response up, but IgG yield, so how many grams of immunoglobulin G did the cow produce? And as you can see, we got a nice quadratic response, okay, with the 32 grams being optimum for that. Fat yield, remember I said fat was really important. Same kind of response, again with 32 grams being the highest. Protein, not as dramatic, but still significant, the 32 grams. So generally, colostrum quality, niacin-fed cows produce higher quality colostrum. IgG yield, fat and protein yields resulted in quadratic effects with the greatest values in cows fed 32 grams per day during the prepartum period. So this supports our Kayla's master's work. Now we'll talk about the calf results, which we didn't do in the other study. Those are some calves on her project at the Fairchild Dairy. Calf plasma IgG. Remember, failure passive transfer is defined as less than 10 grams per liter. Well, we were all set. We ranged from 28.5, 32, 31. No differences there. Okay, so we were a little disappointed, but some very interesting things happened. We saw our starter grain. Now, there are some dairy producers in the audience here. Starter grain, you want them to eat more. We actually saw it trend down a little bit, okay, trend down a little bit. But average daily gain had a quadratic response. So they were eating less starter, but up to 32 grams, they gained more weight. Notice 48 grams. So what's going on? They're consuming less grain. Remember, they were fed the same amount of milk replacer. When we look at feed efficiency, we get this great response here. This got us very excited. So starter intake tended to be less in calves born or cows fed niacin, but average daily gain had quadratic tendencies, with the greatest gains over 6 weeks being cows fed to 32 grams. Calves from niacin fed cows consumed less starter, but gained more up to 32 grams. Improved feed efficiency occurred at 32 grams. What we think could be happening is there's other things in colostrum that we didn't measure. Insulin-like growth factor 1 has been shown in some studies to increase intestinal development in animals. Okay, so that's one thing. Lactoferrin has also been shown to do the same thing. That's present in colostrum. So the next study will look at if these things are actually enhanced by the niacin. So acknowledgements, this is, Kayla's not here because she's finishing up experiment 2, which will end on Monday, and she's actually bleeding cows right now. DSM, which is a large vitamin company. Probably most of the vitamins that you consume are made by this company. They provided the niacin. Cargill Provimi, they provided the milk replacer and the calf starter. The Ag Experiment Station for supporting the work, and also my Hatch multi-state research project. So with that, I'll try to answer any of your questions that you may have. Anita.
How many of these cows have any of these cows that you've been doing the prepartum feedings, have any of them gone to second pregnancy yet?
Have any? Yeah, no, they're in the barn. They're heifers now. So this was done. She finished. Let's see. They're going to start pretty quick. She finished in February of 2016, so they were only 6 weeks old then. So they'll be starting.
As milk production.
Yeah.
But what about the and so this was the second study. So the cows that gave birth for this study haven't gone.
The first group has, this group has not. Yeah, and that's a good question. I don't know what the outcome is. That the problem we run into is they're always used in research experiments down there, and there's other things impacting the responses. Mm-hmm. So, yes.
All that data, the calf starter thing seems to be the most confusing. You think that's kind of remote from cow's milk to colostrum, but is there some maybe a chemical trigger?
Well, that's what we're thinking. It either could be fetal programming, or, and I'm thinking more likely it's the IGF-1 that's present in the colostrum or the lactoferrin that's present in the colostrum. They actually did research with chickens, and they gave lactoferrin to chickens, bovine lactoferrin, and they saw an increase in intestinal development in the chicken. UC Davis did that work. There's work out of Penn State and also out of Switzerland that looks at IGF-1 as a potential for this. So it's kind of interesting from that standpoint, and to get this response after. And there's also a lot of data that says that the more colostrum, the better quality colostrum. Really neat study out of Arizona. The research was actually done in Wisconsin. Saw these cows produce like 2,000, 3,000 pounds more milk in their first lactation just by how they were treated on day one. So there's lots of things going on here besides the antibodies. Becky had a question.
Yeah, I was curious whether niacin is a standard component now of like
Rations?
rations.
So in some cases, yeah, it's usually done to prevent ketosis or help with ketosis, which is rapid mobilization of body fat. And that's been shown there in heavy cows, but not necessarily as a routine. So we had the idea, actually this whole idea came from a graduate student many years ago who said, niacin increases blood flow. Colostrogenesis requires the antibodies to be taken from the bone marrow to the mammary gland. Maybe there's something there. And so the first time, okay, yeah, maybe we saw something. Then to repeat it and then see a response in the babies, it was kind of exciting for us. So. Thanks.